What if Prince Harry just found out that Meghan Markle met with King Charles and didn't tell him? Imagine the shock, the betrayal, the sense of being completely left out of the loop on something so personal, so pivotal, that it could change the course of his family and his public life forever. The whispers in the palace corridors had been growing louder for weeks, and yet Harry remained oblivious until now. The moment he learned the truth, his world shifted in a way that no one could have anticipated. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all began quietly, almost imperceptibly. A palace aide mentioned a private conversation between Meghan and the king, framed as nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But insiders hinted otherwise. There were details, hints, and subtle actions that didn't align with the official narrative, and gradually, the pieces began to paint a picture that was both shocking and profoundly personal. A secret meeting, a renegotiation of royal roles, and a unilateral decision to approach the monarch alone. These weren't small matters. These were seismic moves that could shake not only Harry's world, but the very foundations of the royal family's public image. Why did Meghan do it? Was it strategic, or personal, or a mix of both? Did she see this as a way to reclaim power, influence, or perhaps even a way to secure her legacy while keeping Harry at a distance? These questions haunted those within the palace walls. And now, Harry, for the first time, was confronting the answers, and they were far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about family tensions or media gossip. We're talking about decades of royal tradition, centuries of protocol, and the intricate web of alliances, loyalty, and power that underpins the British monarchy. One secret meeting, one undisclosed conversation, and suddenly, the delicate balance was shattered. The repercussions were immediate, intense, and potentially irreversible. For Harry, it wasn't just the secrecy that stung. It was the betrayal, the feeling that someone he loved and trusted had acted behind his back. Emotions ran high. Anger, confusion, disbelief, and an acute sense of being manipulated. And yet, beneath the surface, there was also a complex mix of curiosity and concern. What exactly had Meghan said? What had she promised? What could this mean for their family, their children, and their public image? These weren't questions that could be answered casually. They demanded scrutiny, investigation, and, ultimately, confrontation. Meanwhile, inside the palace, whispers grew louder, corridors buzzed with speculation, and aides carefully navigated the tension. Every message, every meeting, every glance carried weight. Some loyalists feared that the revelation would spark a public fallout. Others worried about the private consequences. And amidst all of this, Meghan's intentions remained an enigma. Was this a strategic maneuver, a genuine desire to repair relationships, or something more? The layers of complexity were endless, and the answers were elusive. The timing of the revelation only intensified its impact. Weeks had passed since Meghan's secret meeting, and the ripple effects were only now reaching Harry. The delay made it worse. An entire period of uncertainty, of living in the dark, and of imagining scenarios that ranged from the plausible to the catastrophic. Every aide, every friend, every insider had to choose their words carefully, knowing that the wrong statement could escalate the drama beyond control. So, what exactly happened in that clandestine meeting? Some reports suggest that Meghan laid out her vision for a renewed public image, one that could reconcile her past controversies with a potential return to royal circles, but without Harry by her side. Can you imagine how that news must have landed for him? The notion that Meghan might be plotting a path forward alone, negotiating directly with his father, without a single word to him, is not just shocking, it's potentially devastating. The palace is a place of rules, traditions, and meticulously orchestrated appearances. Yet here was an unprecedented disruption, a secret discussion that challenged the status quo, tested loyalties, and left a member of the family blindsided. The immediate questions are obvious. Did the king know the impact this would have on Harry? Was Meghan's plan intended to test boundaries, gauge loyalty, or simply assert control? And most crucially, how would Harry respond to this betrayal once he had all the facts? The unfolding scenario is nothing short of dramatic. Imagine Harry piecing together information from confidants, aides, and unofficial sources, realizing the extent of what had occurred. It's a mix of shock, disbelief, and strategic calculation. What next? How does one respond to a situation where trust has been fractured, where secrecy and power collide, and where the entire world is watching? Each decision carries consequences, both personal and public, and the stakes couldn't be higher. And while the palace buzzed with speculation, the public remained largely unaware, at least, until leaks began surfacing. Journalists caught wind of the story, social media exploded with speculation, and suddenly, the private turmoil of the royal family became a public fascination. Headlines hinted at clandestine meetings, secret negotiations, and family betrayal. Audiences worldwide were left wondering, what was Meghan thinking, and how would Harry handle the revelation? Every moment now counts. Every phone call, every whispered conversation, every document could alter the trajectory of the story. As we dive deeper into this drama, you'll see just how complex and emotionally charged these events are. Harry's journey is not only about uncovering the truth, it's about navigating a web of secrecy, strategy, and loyalty that stretches across palaces, advisors, and public perception. And here's the kicker. What came out of Meghan's meeting wasn't just a proposal, it was a challenge. A challenge to Harry, to his understanding of loyalty, and to the very dynamics of their relationship. It was a test of boundaries, intentions, and the intricate balance between personal desire and familial duty. How he responds could redefine the royal narrative, affect public opinion, and alter the course of history in ways that are still unfolding. So, the question remains, what exactly did Meghan say to King Charles, and why did she do it without Harry? The answer is more layered than anyone could predict. And as we peel back each layer, examining the timeline, the hidden conversations, and the emotional fallout, you'll begin to understand why this story is so explosive, so compelling, and why it matters right now. What if everything Harry thought he knew about Meghan's loyalty was wrong? That's exactly the thought running through his mind the moment the whispers start circulating. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. A subtle comment from a palace aide here, a hushed phone call there, and suddenly, the entire narrative he believed in begins to fracture. The first hint comes as a casual remark during a briefing. You should know, there's been a private conversation between Meghan and Charles. At first, Harry dismisses it. After all, what could a short discussion really mean? But then the details start to emerge, and what seemed insignificant at first becomes a seismic revelation. The whispers describe the meeting as brief, polite, strategic. Some insiders claim it was a matter of public image, how Meghan could reshape her narrative, regain influence, and potentially return to royal favor. The catch? Harry was not included, not consulted, not even informed. In palace terms, this is extraordinary. Every decision that impacts a family member, every meeting involving power and image, typically requires transparency. But here, Meghan had crossed the line, at least in Harry's eyes, and the implications are immediate and intense. Imagine the shock, learning that someone you trust, someone you share a life with, took a step so significant without your knowledge. The emotional spectrum is vast. First comes disbelief. How could she meet the king alone? Then anger. Why was he left out? And beneath it all, a gnawing sense of betrayal. Did she do it for herself, for strategy, or for some plan Harry hasn't yet begun to understand? Each thought is heavier than the last, and as the whispers spread, the weight of uncertainty grows exponentially. Meanwhile, the palace moves with precision. Every aide, every staff member, every royal insider knows the potential for drama. Conversations are measured, expressions carefully controlled. Rumors swirl in corridors, in small rooms behind closed doors. A private conversation becomes something far more consequential. A chess move in a game where trust, power, and public perception are all at stake. And Harry, in the midst of it all, is left piecing together fragments, trying to understand what has happened while keeping his own emotions in check. The timeline of events is crucial. Reports indicate that Meghan's meeting took place several weeks ago. In that span, Harry has lived in a state of partial knowledge, unaware of the true extent of her actions. Every day, without knowing, intensifies the eventual shock. He begins asking questions, discreetly at first. He calls old friends, reaches out to aides, seeks confirmations. Each answer opens new questions, contradictions emerge, and the puzzle only deepens. What's more, conflicting reports emerge from within the palace. Some aides insist the meeting was purely procedural, a harmless discussion about charity initiatives or public appearances. Others hint at something far more deliberate, that Meghan was testing boundaries, gauging how receptive the king would be to a potential return, and perhaps even signaling that she intended to move forward alone. The contradictions are maddening, and Harry feels caught between the factual and the speculative, the private and the public, the emotional and the strategic. The emotional stakes escalate further when a trusted confidant quietly tells Harry what they know. She wasn't just talking about appearances, the source whispers. It was about her future, her role, her influence, and her autonomy. Alone, the words hit like a physical blow. The realization dawns. Meghan has not only acted without him, but may have been shaping a future that excludes his input entirely. Every sense of loyalty and partnership is suddenly in question. How could she orchestrate something so monumental without even a hint, a clue, a discussion? At this point, Harry's thoughts begin to spiral. Could he have missed the signs? Was there anything in her behavior that hinted at this clandestine plan? Or is this simply a betrayal so skillful that it remained invisible until now? The questions are endless. Every past interaction, every private conversation, every moment of trust is suddenly reevaluated under a new, unsettling lens. And yet, despite the emotional turbulence, a sense of strategic focus begins to form. Harry knows he cannot react blindly. He must understand the full scope of the meeting, the motives behind it, and the potential consequences. As these realizations set in, another layer of complexity emerges: the public. Social media, tabloids, and news outlets have not yet caught wind of the secret. If this story leaked prematurely, the consequences could be catastrophic, both personally and institutionally. Every whisper within the palace carries the weight of potential exposure. The aides are careful, measured, anxious. And Harry, though privately furious and hurt, must navigate a minefield of secrecy and strategy, balancing personal feelings with public ramifications. And then comes the most unexpected revelation. The meeting may not have been just a private discussion about her role. Some sources hint at offers, promises, even strategic propositions made directly to King Charles. Without Harry's knowledge, offers that could redefine Meghan's standing in the monarchy, a chance to return, to renegotiate her image, to reclaim influence, but on terms Harry knows nothing about. The enormity of the act is overwhelming. How does one even process the fact that a spouse could negotiate with a family member of such stature in secret? What does this mean for trust, loyalty, and partnership? Every moment that passes increases tension. Harry begins constructing a mental map of what might have occurred in that room. He imagines the dialogue, the subtle cues, the tone, the strategy. Each scenario is more alarming than the last. The idea that Meghan could independently navigate these high-stakes conversations, wielding influence, testing limits, and doing so without him, is both shocking and unsettling. It challenges everything Harry believed about their relationship, about transparency, about partnership. At the same time, the palace is not a neutral backdrop. The king, aware of Meghan's approach, is assessing implications, weighing loyalty against potential public perception, and navigating centuries of tradition. Advisors, aides, and courtiers are all engaged in their own calculations, some subtle, some bold. Every word, every gesture is significant. And in the middle of it, Harry feels both powerless and determined, acutely aware that the next steps he takes could define the trajectory of this family drama for months, or even years, to come. So, what happens when whispers turn into evidence? When rumors solidify into undeniable facts? Harry is forced into action. He begins contacting insiders, seeking confirmations, piecing together timelines, and interpreting subtle signals that others might overlook. The process is meticulous, exhausting, emotionally charged. Yet it is necessary, because one thing has become painfully clear: Meghan's secret meeting is not a minor issue. It is a pivotal moment, one that could alter the course of relationships, reputations, and even royal history. And just when Harry begins to feel he understands the scope, the first solid confirmation arrives, a memo, a note, or perhaps a whispered admission from someone within the palace. It confirms everything he feared and suspected. Meghan met with King Charles, discussed her return and her image, and did so independently. The betrayal is complete. The emotional impact is immediate and profound. Questions explode. Why now? Why alone? What were the terms? And most importantly, what does this mean for Harry's place in the picture? But as Harry grapples with the magnitude of the revelation, one truth crystallizes: nothing will ever be the same. The balance of trust, love, and loyalty has shifted. The secret, once confined to whispers, now hangs over him like a storm cloud, threatening to erupt. And yet, amidst the turmoil, there is a glimmer of clarity. Harry must act, investigate, and confront this reality head-on. The decisions he makes next will determine the trajectory of not only his personal life, but the legacy of the royal narrative itself. What happens when the truth lands like a thunderbolt? Harry didn't have long to stew in uncertainty before the palace acted. An urgent call came through, piercing the calm of his day, demanding immediate attention. The ringtone itself felt like a warning. He stared at the screen, heart racing, knowing this wasn't just any call. It was from Kensington Palace. The very name sent a chill down his spine. The aides on the other end were terse, controlled, and unusually formal. Nothing about this felt ordinary. The first words from the aide cut straight to the point. "Sir, there's an urgent matter regarding a private meeting with the king. You need to be informed immediately." There was no time for pleasantries, no sugarcoating. Harry's mind raced. Could they be referring to Meghan? His pulse quickened as 100 scenarios flashed before him, each more shocking than the last. The casual dismissal he had hoped for evaporated instantly. As the call continued, the tension was palpable. Every pause, every careful choice of words hinted at gravity, at secrecy, and at stakes higher than Harry had imagined. The aide explained that Meghan had met with King Charles weeks ago, alone. Alone. The word echoed in Harry's mind. How could this have happened without him? How could she negotiate, propose, or even discuss her potential return without him knowing? The emotional jolt was immediate. Betrayal, anger, confusion, disbelief. Questions flooded Harry's mind. Was this a calculated move by Meghan? Was she testing the waters for her own benefit? Or was this something orchestrated by palace insiders, deliberately excluding him to manipulate dynamics? Every answer led to more questions. Every revelation only deepened the sense of being blindsided. And while he processed this, the aides offered fragments of information, careful not to reveal too much too soon. Every word, every hesitation, was weighted with significance. Harry demanded details. He needed names, dates, motives, and context. Who else was involved? Were there witnesses? What had Meghan said? The aides explained as much as protocol allowed. The meeting had been discreet, minimal staff present, private, and controlled. The king had listened, responded, and engaged, but always in a manner that kept Harry completely out of the loop. This was not oversight. This was deliberate, and the implications were staggering. The conversation painted a picture of careful maneuvering. Meghan had not only attended this meeting, but had positioned herself strategically. She discussed her public image, her potential future, and the possibility of returning to royal duties. But crucially, she had done so independently. Harry's mind struggled to reconcile this. How could someone he trusted, someone he loved, take such bold steps without even a hint? His pulse raced, and anger mingled with confusion. This was more than secrecy. It was a calculated move that questioned loyalty and partnership. As the call continued, the aide revealed another layer. The palace had convened an emergency session following the meeting. Key advisors were summoned to discuss the ramifications, the messaging, and the strategy moving forward. This was not routine. This was extraordinary. Harry's stomach tightened. He realized that the moment he picked up the phone, he was being drawn into a drama that had been quietly unfolding without his knowledge. The power dynamics, the tension, and the stakes were unprecedented. Questions for the audience. How would you react if someone you trusted negotiated with your family, plotted a path forward, and didn't tell you? How do you balance personal feelings with strategic necessity? Harry faced the impossible. He needed clarity, but every answer risked inflaming the situation further. Every move he made had to be deliberate, calculated, and emotionally measured. The aides, sensing his rising frustration, offered pieces of reassurance. The king had listened, yes, but there was no final agreement, no commitment beyond the discussion. The meeting was exploratory, probing. Yet the very fact that it occurred, the very fact that Meghan had taken the initiative without Harry, felt like a direct challenge. The emotional impact was immediate. Every conversation, every interaction, now had to be filtered through a lens of caution, suspicion, and strategic awareness. As the discussion progressed, Harry's mind began to map out next steps. Investigate, confirm, confront, but also control the narrative. The palace, with centuries of tradition and procedure, was now a battleground of loyalty, secrecy, and strategy. Each aide's carefully chosen words, each glance, each nuance carried significance. Harry realized that the call was just the beginning. A trigger that would set in motion a series of revelations, decisions, and confrontations that could redefine relationships and reputations. And then came the part that truly shocked him. During the call, the aide hesitated, glanced over their shoulder, and quietly revealed that Meghan's proposals were bold. She had suggested scenarios that challenged protocol, tested boundaries, and hinted at a return on her own terms. The implication was clear. She was negotiating not just her image but her autonomy, her influence, and perhaps even her control over the narrative. Alone, without Harry, the magnitude of this revelation sank in slowly, painfully. Harry felt a mix of fury, hurt, and disbelief. How could someone he trusted act independently in such a high-stakes environment? How could she even consider moving forward without him? And yet, there was also a begrudging recognition of her audacity, her strategic thinking, her ability to maneuver within the palace framework. It was a complicated cocktail of admiration, anger, and betrayal. The conversation ended with instructions. Harry needed to prepare for a direct discussion with the king, to engage with advisors, and to assess the next steps carefully. He hung up the phone, heart pounding, mind racing, and a plan forming. But even as he considered his strategy, doubts gnawed at him. How much did the king already know? Were there other secret discussions he hadn't yet uncovered? And most importantly, how would Meghan react if she realized he knew everything? The stakes could not have been higher. The palace was a place of rules, hierarchy, and tradition, yet here was a disruption that threatened the delicate balance. Harry felt the weight of centuries of expectation pressing down on him, compounded by the personal betrayal he had just discovered. Every subsequent move would be scrutinized, every action interpreted, and every word potentially weaponized. So what did Harry do next? He began reaching out to trusted aides, friends, and confidants. He mapped timelines, cross-checked accounts, and sought confirmation from multiple sources. Every detail mattered. Every fragment of information was crucial. The emergency call had thrown him into the eye of a storm of secrecy, strategy, and emotion that was only beginning to unfold. And just when Harry thought he had a handle on the situation, a new detail emerged. Someone within the palace hinted that Meghan's meeting with the king was not a one-off event. There were discussions, perhaps more private interactions, that he had yet to uncover. The plot thickened, the tension escalated, and the sense of urgency became overwhelming. What would you do if someone you trusted not only kept a secret from you, but actively shaped a plan that excluded you entirely? For Harry, the question wasn't hypothetical, it was his reality. As the shock of the emergency call settled, the magnitude of Meghan's actions began to crystallize. This wasn't merely a conversation with King Charles. It was a carefully calculated maneuver, a strategic step designed to test boundaries, reclaim influence, and potentially reshape her role within the royal sphere. And Harry had been left completely in the dark. The first thing he needed to understand was motive. Why would Meghan take such a bold step, alone, and without consultation? Some insiders speculated that she had become frustrated with the limitations placed on her public image, with the constant scrutiny and criticism following her exit from royal life. Others suggested it was about control, a way to reassert agency in a world where every move is dissected, judged, and politicized. And then there were whispers of image rehabilitation, carefully curated to shift public perception, reclaim relevance, and position herself as indispensable to the monarchy, at least in the eyes of certain key figures. Harry couldn't help but replay every interaction in his mind. Each smile, each public statement, each private conversation. Was there a hidden agenda? Was this another layer of the strategy he had overlooked? The emotional turmoil was intense. Anger, disbelief, hurt. But also a reluctant acknowledgement of her intelligence and strategic thinking. She had orchestrated a situation that forced the king, the palace, and indirectly Harry himself into a position where they had to respond. According to insiders, Meghan's proposals were not simple or superficial. She reportedly outlined potential roles, responsibilities, and public appearances that could restore her image while aligning with royal expectations. But crucially, she framed these proposals independently. She did not seek Harry's counsel, his opinion, or even his awareness. This autonomy, while impressive strategically, hit Harry like a physical blow. It was the kind of maneuver that could redefine power dynamics within their relationship, challenging not only trust but partnership itself. The palace context made it even more complicated. King Charles, aware of the delicate dynamics, had to navigate tradition, protocol, and the potential public fallout. Advisors and aides whispered caution and strategy into his ear, weighing every response. Meghan's agenda wasn't just about her own future. It touched every aspect of the royal structure. The monarchy, centuries old and steeped in precedent, suddenly faced a challenge from within, and the epicenter of it was a private conversation that Harry had no part in. But what did Meghan hope to achieve, really? Sources suggest several possibilities. First, there was the idea of returning, carefully and selectively, to royal duties in a manner that didn't compromise her independence. Second, there was the goal of image rehabilitation, counteracting years of media scrutiny and public criticism with controlled visibility and strategic appearances. Third, and perhaps most emotionally charged, was the assertion of autonomy, showing both Harry and the royal establishment that she could navigate this complex world alone. Harry's reaction was a turbulent mix of emotions. He felt betrayed, yes, but also challenged. The notion that Meghan had created her own agenda without him felt like a test, a subtle assertion of power that left him both hurt and wary. How could someone act so decisively, so independently, in matters that directly affected both their personal and public lives? The questions mounted, each one more uncomfortable than the last. And yet, in the midst of this turmoil, a part of him had to recognize her audacity, her strategic thinking, and her ability to influence outcomes in a world that often seems rigid and impenetrable. As Harry delved deeper into Meghan's secret agenda, another layer emerged: timing. The meeting with King Charles had occurred weeks ago, meaning Meghan had been quietly shaping the narrative while Harry remained unaware. This delay magnified the emotional impact. Days turned into weeks of ignorance, and every passing moment increased the potential consequences of revelation. The palace had been monitoring reactions, guiding conversations, and controlling information, all while Harry processed partial truths and fragmented rumors. The emotional weight was intense, almost suffocating. Audience question: how would you react if you discovered your partner had independently negotiated your shared future behind your back? How do you balance trust, anger, and strategic necessity in that moment? Harry faced exactly this dilemma. His decisions had to be precise, calculated, and measured, not only for the sake of his relationship, but for the implications it could have on public perception, media narratives, and the broader dynamics of royal authority. The content of Meghan's agenda, as leaked by insiders, was as provocative as it was strategic. She reportedly proposed a careful re-entry into public life, emphasizing charitable initiatives, public appearances, and a restored, positive image. But she framed these proposals in a way that positioned her as independent, capable, and strategic, without any input from Harry. For the king and his advisors, the meeting was both enlightening and unnerving. Meghan had crafted a narrative that was persuasive, compelling, and, most importantly, self-directed. Harry had to grapple with contradictions. On one hand, he was impressed by the strategic thought behind her actions. On the other, he felt an acute sense of exclusion. The emotional weight of being left out of a decision that directly impacted both their futures was overwhelming. Every palace conversation, every public appearance, Every interaction now had to be filtered through this new understanding of Meghan's autonomy. The ground beneath him had shifted, and he had to navigate carefully. In the days following the revelation, Harry began piecing together the timeline, identifying advisors, and reconstructing what had occurred in that private room. Each discovery added clarity, but also deepened the tension. The strategic intent of Meghan's meeting was undeniable. She had acted decisively, skillfully, and independently. Yet, in doing so, she had created a fissure, both personal and institutional, that demanded response. And then came another unexpected twist. Some insiders hinted that Meghan's agenda included not just image rehabilitation, but the possibility of negotiating certain privileges or arrangements that could alter dynamics within the royal family. While the specifics remain confidential, the implication was clear. She had ambitions that extended beyond public perception, ambitions that could impact decision-making, influence, and even protocol. For Harry, this added a layer of complexity he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't merely about trust or betrayal. It was about navigating a landscape where personal and institutional stakes collided. As the picture became clearer, Harry realized he needed to act strategically. He reached out to key confidants, advisors, and allies, seeking guidance on how to approach the situation. Each conversation was careful, measured, and fraught with emotional tension. How could he confront Meghan, engage with the king, and manage palace dynamics without escalating the situation? The answers were not simple, and the path forward was anything but certain. But the most startling revelation was yet to come. A whisper from a palace insider suggested that Meghan's meeting had left an impression on the king, one that was unexpected, unprecedented, and potentially transformative. Her proposals, framed independently, had not only tested Harry's exclusion, but had challenged the king's assumptions about loyalty, influence, and partnership. The implications were massive, both emotionally and strategically. So, as Harry navigated this web of secrecy, strategy, and emotion, he realized one undeniable truth. Meghan's secret agenda was not just a personal maneuver. It was a calculated disruption, a bold assertion of autonomy, and a dramatic reshaping of power dynamics. Every step, every word, every action mattered. And as he prepared to confront the reality of her choices, one question loomed larger than any other. What would she do next, and how would he respond? Who can you trust when the very people you rely on may have hidden agendas of their own? That was the question weighing heavily on Harry as the palace drama intensified. The revelation of Meghan's secret meeting with King Charles had already sent shockwaves through his life. But now, as he attempted to navigate the labyrinthine world of palace politics, he realized that betrayal could come from unexpected quarters. Allies weren't always allies, and loyalty often carried shades of self-interest. It began subtly. A familiar aide, someone Harry had trusted for years, seemed nervous, evasive, and overly careful in conversation. Words were chosen with precision, glances lingered too long, and pauses suggested information withheld. Harry's instincts, honed through years of navigating both media scrutiny and royal protocol, told him something was off. This wasn't just about Meghan's actions anymore. The question now was, who else knew more than they were letting on? Inside the palace, whispers of Meghan's meeting circulated like a slow-burning fire. Some courtiers expressed concern over protocol breaches. Others admired her audacity. But the most unsettling aspect for Harry was realizing that not everyone was aligned with him. Certain advisors, perhaps calculating political advantage or anticipating shifts in power, began feeding him selective information, or in some cases, withholding it altogether. Trust, once implicit, had to be reassessed. The emotional strain was immense. Harry had to balance personal feelings with political realities. Anger and hurt mingled with the need for strategy, calculation, and patience. He couldn't afford to react purely on emotion. Any misstep could have consequences both public and private. Yet the sense of betrayal, not only by Meghan but potentially by those surrounding him, was suffocating. How could he protect himself and his family when the lines between friend and foe were so blurred? One particularly tense moment came when a longtime confidant hesitated before answering a question about the timing of Meghan's meeting. Their eyes flicked toward a senior aide, and Harry immediately sensed something unspoken. A subtle signal, a pause, a carefully crafted phrase. Everything pointed to layers of secrecy he had yet to uncover. He realized that palace life was not just about protocol or appearances. It was a delicate dance of influence, loyalty, and strategy, where one misstep could cost trust, reputation, or even relationships. Audience question: if you were in Harry's position, how would you confront someone you trusted when even your closest allies might not be fully transparent? How do you separate genuine loyalty from hidden motives? For Harry, these were not theoretical questions. They were urgent and unavoidable. Every conversation, every interaction, became a calculated test of allegiance. Amidst this tension, conflicting reports began to surface. Some advisors claimed Meghan's meeting was innocuous, that it was merely an exploratory discussion without tangible consequences. Others hinted at a more deliberate agenda: Meghan testing limits, gauging how far she could push the king, and positioning herself independently. The contradictions were maddening, leaving Harry oscillating between disbelief, anger, and careful contemplation. How could the same meeting be interpreted in such dramatically different ways? And more importantly, which version reflected reality? Adding complexity, Harry began noticing subtle shifts in palace behavior. Certain aides, previously neutral or supportive, suddenly became less forthcoming. Meetings that had once been routine now carried undercurrents of caution, whispered words, and careful monitoring of reactions. It became evident that Meghan's meeting had not only disrupted family dynamics, but had sent ripples through the palace hierarchy, revealing alliances, preferences, and hidden loyalties. Harry had entered a world where perception often mattered as much as truth, and navigating it required both intuition and caution. Then came a revelation that hit harder than any initial disclosure. One of Harry's supposed allies had known about Meghan's meeting long before he did. They had withheld this information, perhaps calculating when or how it would surface, or weighing the potential fallout. The realization was a gut punch. Betrayal, once suspected, now became tangible. Every gesture, every word, every assurance from trusted individuals had to be re-examined. Could he rely on anyone? Was he truly alone in confronting the consequences of Meghan's independent actions? The emotional stakes escalated further when Harry discovered that some palace insiders were subtly steering narratives to minimize the impact of Meghan's meeting. Meetings were restructured, notes carefully worded, and public statements crafted with precision, all designed to maintain appearances. Yet behind the scenes, tension simmered. Advisors who appeared loyal were maneuvering to protect their positions, reputations, or influence, leaving Harry to question not only their intentions, but also his own strategy for navigating the fallout. Every conversation now carried weight. Every whisper, glance, and suggestion could shift the balance. Harry began constructing mental maps of loyalty, influence, and information flow, trying to identify which advisors could be trusted and which might be leveraging the situation for personal advantage. Emotional vigilance became critical. Mistakes could be exploited, and any perceived misstep could amplify the drama. And yet, in the midst of uncertainty and betrayal, Harry found glimmers of support. Certain confidants, friends, aides, and advisors remained steadfast, providing not only factual insight but also emotional grounding. Their loyalty offered a lifeline, a reminder that even in a world filled with strategic maneuvering and concealed motives, genuine alliances still existed. These individuals became crucial partners as Harry prepared to confront the realities of Meghan's secret actions and the ripple effects that followed. Audience question: how do you decide who to trust when everyone around you has their own agenda? Could Harry truly identify allies from opportunists before it was too late? The stakes were higher than ever. This was not a theoretical exercise. It was a test of judgment, resilience, and emotional intelligence under intense pressure. As the layers of palace intrigue unfolded, Harry began piecing together the network of influences surrounding Meghan's actions. He learned that certain advisors had encouraged her to pursue independent dialogue, perhaps underestimating the potential for conflict or believing it aligned with broader strategic goals. Others had actively withheld information from him, calculating when it would be revealed or how he might react. The complexity of these alliances was dizzying, and the emotional burden weighed heavily. And just when Harry thought he had mapped the terrain of loyalty and betrayal, a new revelation emerged. A high-ranking palace official, someone whose counsel he had relied upon for years, hinted that Meghan's secret actions were only part of a broader strategic vision. There were additional discussions, correspondences, and maneuvers yet to be uncovered. The sense of urgency intensified. Time was of the essence, and every moment he delayed increased both the emotional and strategic stakes. So Harry faced a stark reality, the world he thought he understood. Where allies could be trusted, loyalty was clear, and intentions were transparent, no longer existed. The web of secrecy, strategy, and ambition was far more intricate than he had imagined. Every step he took now had to account for potential betrayal, hidden motives, and the unpredictable consequences of Meghan's independent actions. Have you ever tried to piece together an event you weren't invited to, relying only on whispers, fragments, and half-truths? That's exactly what Harry faced as he began reconstructing Meghan's secret meeting with King Charles. The challenge wasn't just about understanding what happened. It was about timing, context, and the subtle shifts that made this meeting not just a conversation, but a calculated maneuver with far-reaching consequences. The first step was to establish the timeline. Weeks had passed since the meeting occurred, and in that time, Meghan had moved quietly, almost invisibly, orchestrating her return to palace discussions. Harry, initially unaware, now needed to track every detail, every interaction, and every hint that could shed light on the agenda. According to insiders, the meeting had been scheduled with careful precision. Every hour, every location, every participant had been deliberately chosen to minimize scrutiny and maximize control. It reportedly began on a quiet Tuesday morning. The King's diary, meticulously maintained and often scrutinized for protocol, had an unusual entry: private discussion, HRM and MM. To the casual observer, it might have seemed innocuous, but Harry knew better. The entry marked the first step in a sequence that would ripple through the palace, shifting alliances, testing loyalty, and challenging assumptions. As Harry dug deeper, he learned that Meghan had arrived at the palace under the guise of routine engagements. Security arrangements were standard, but subtle deviations, unusually tight scheduling, minimal staff, restricted access, signaled that this was not an ordinary visit. It was controlled, intentional, and carefully choreographed. For Harry, each detail added clarity, but also heightened the sense of betrayal. She had engineered an environment in which she could negotiate independently, strategically, and without his knowledge. Audience question: if you were Harry, how would you feel learning that someone you trusted had meticulously planned a meeting in secret? Would the precision make it feel more calculated or more cunning? Every step of Meghan's meeting was deliberate, each action serving multiple purposes: controlling perception, managing timing, and influencing outcomes. The duration of the meeting was deliberately concise, according to insiders, long enough to convey intentions, test reactions, and propose possibilities, but short enough to limit exposure and scrutiny. King Charles, seasoned and aware of the potential implications, engaged carefully, responding with measured curiosity and strategic listening. Every exchange, every pause, every nod carried weight. Harry could almost envision the room, the soft hum of palace life beyond the walls, the subtle gestures, the eyes of aides and security staff, all orchestrated to ensure that the meeting remained confidential. But timing alone wasn't the only factor. The sequence of events surrounding the meeting was equally critical. Leading up to it, Meghan had subtly adjusted her public statements, interviews, and social media presence, carefully shaping the narrative without drawing attention to the meeting itself. In the days following, she maintained a delicate balance, appearing engaged with charitable and personal endeavors, while quietly signaling readiness to negotiate and re-enter certain royal spheres. It was a masterclass in timing, strategy, and control. For Harry, reconstructing this timeline became a forensic exercise. Every text, email, and private message needed review. Each conversation with aides, friends, or palace staff could provide clues. And every minor detail, like the precise timing of a security checkpoint or the allocation of staff to manage a corridor, offered insight into how meticulously Meghan had engineered the meeting. The emotional weight of this realization was intense. Not only had she acted independently, but she had done so with remarkable precision, suggesting foresight and intentionality. Then came the hardest part, understanding the implications of the timeline. The meeting had occurred at a point when Harry believed he had full situational awareness. He assumed, wrongly, that he knew what was happening, who was involved, and how decisions were made. In reality, Meghan had already created a parallel narrative, a strategy unfolding in real time, outside his knowledge, shaping perceptions, alliances, and potential outcomes. The sense of exclusion was staggering. Every day he had lived in ignorance now felt like a missed opportunity, a lost chance to participate, respond, or intervene. The sequence of events also highlighted a deliberate layering of information. Meghan had not only structured the meeting itself, but also orchestrated how and when its existence would become known. Certain aides were instructed to limit disclosures. Others were positioned to control interpretations. The result was a complex choreography. Harry remained unaware, the king engaged cautiously, and the palace was positioned to manage fallout with precision. Each layer of timing reinforced the strategic nature of the meeting, and each layer intensified Harry's sense of being blindsided. Audience question: how would you react if you discovered that even the smallest details of someone's actions were calculated to exclude you? How would you determine intent, loyalty, and potential consequences? For Harry, the process was exhausting, emotionally draining, and crucial. He had to assess not just the meeting itself, but the cascade of events surrounding it, the preparation, execution, and aftermath, all orchestrated without his involvement. As he continued piecing together the timeline, Harry began to map the potential motives and outcomes. Meghan's actions were consistent with a strategy designed to test boundaries, gauge reception, and position herself independently. The timing, the sequence, the controlled disclosures, all suggested a deliberate attempt to influence both the king and public perception. For Harry, this realization deepened the emotional impact. Betrayal was now intertwined with strategic sophistication, and the combination was both painful and disorienting. Moreover, the timeline revealed subtle contradictions in palace communications. While some officials maintained that the meeting was routine, others hinted at more significant discussions. Texts, emails, and private memos suggested that Meghan had presented proposals that went beyond image rehabilitation, touching on autonomy, influence, and potential re-entry scenarios. The timing of these communications, carefully aligned with public appearances and strategic engagements, reinforced the notion that this was not a casual conversation. It was a carefully executed plan. And just when Harry thought he had a grasp on the sequence, a startling detail emerged. The king had reportedly taken notes, subtle but significant, during the meeting. The implication was profound. Meghan's words, her proposals, and her positioning were not only recorded, but likely analyzed for long-term strategic implications. Harry realized that the meeting had consequences far beyond what he had imagined. It wasn't just a private conversation. It was an event with ripples extending through the palace, family, and public perception. In reconstructing the timeline, Harry also discovered the deliberate pacing of Meghan's actions. Each step was calculated. Her arrival, the meeting's duration, the choice of words, the controlled exits, and even the timing of her communications with external parties. Everything was precise, designed to create impact, influence perceptions, and minimize exposure. The sophistication of this orchestration left Harry both awed and unsettled. Finally, the timeline revealed one inescapable truth: he had been intentionally excluded. Every element of Meghan's meeting was constructed to ensure he remained unaware until it was either strategically advantageous for her or unavoidable for him. The emotional and strategic implications were staggering. Harry had to reconcile the betrayal, assess the strategic genius, and prepare for a response that would address both personal and institutional consequences. What would you do if the world you trusted suddenly revealed a hidden layer of secrets, and you were the last to know? That was Harry's reality now. Meghan's clandestine meeting with King Charles had already upended his sense of stability, but the emotional impact quickly gave way to a practical need: investigation. He had to uncover the full picture, every detail, every nuance, every hidden action that had shaped this secret encounter. Because in the palace, half-truths were dangerous and assumptions could be fatal. Harry began cautiously, aware that every step could be monitored or misinterpreted. First, he reached out to his closest confidants, those he trusted implicitly, seeking clarity without revealing vulnerability. Friends who had navigated past royal crises offered perspective, outlining the palace's likely motivations and hinting at Meghan's possible intentions. Their insights were invaluable, but they also painted a sobering reality. Much of what he had assumed about loyalty, transparency, and partnership was now in question. The investigation took multiple forms. He combed through digital communications, reviewing messages and emails that might reveal indirect clues about Meghan's planning. Patterns emerged: certain phrases, repeated inquiries, and subtle coordination with advisors pointed toward a deliberate strategy. Each piece of evidence added to the tapestry of Meghan's agenda, highlighting both her independence and the precision with which she executed her plan. The realization was both enlightening and emotionally painful. He had been deliberately excluded, and her actions were meticulously calculated. At the same time, Harry relied on traditional palace sources. Trusted aides and longtime advisors were questioned discreetly. Every conversation required careful navigation. Words had to be chosen deliberately, observations had to be framed carefully, and reactions had to be measured. He quickly realized that not everyone was aligned with him. Some advisors, possibly aware of the meeting from the start, provided partial truths or delayed confirmations, testing how he would respond. The maze of palace politics was proving as treacherous as any media storm, and Harry had to act strategically to separate fact from interpretation. Emotional tension ran high. Each discovery was a mixture of anger, betrayal, and reluctant admiration. Meghan's independent maneuvering revealed her strategic acumen, her ability to operate within complex institutional structures, and her skill in managing perception. Yet at the same time, the personal sting of being left out of such a pivotal decision weighed heavily. Harry felt a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, hurt, outrage, and an unsettling recognition of the breadth of her influence. The investigation also required scrutinizing the timeline further. Dates, locations, communications. All were mapped meticulously. Harry cross-referenced notes from aides, recollections from friends, and fragments of public appearances to build a coherent picture of the events surrounding Meghan's secret meeting. Every detail mattered. Even minor deviations in scheduling, subtle hints in phrasing, or slight changes in behavior became pieces of a complex puzzle. And as the picture became clearer, the scope of Meghan's autonomy and strategic intent became undeniable. Audience question: if you discovered someone you trusted had orchestrated an intricate plan behind your back, would you feel anger, respect, or a mixture of both? Harry's emotional journey mirrors this duality: personal betrayal intertwined with admiration for her calculated approach. Understanding intent is never easy, especially when emotions run deep and stakes are monumental. Another aspect of Harry's investigation involved tracing back communications to external sources. Publicists, aides, and even media contacts were scrutinized to determine whether leaks, deliberate or accidental, had played a role in the unfolding narrative. Harry realized that information flow was tightly controlled, and that any premature disclosure could have massive consequences, both for him and for Meghan. Every discovery needed careful handling to ensure it contributed to understanding, rather than escalating the drama. As he delved deeper, contradictions emerged. Some palace insiders maintained that the meeting was routine, a simple discussion without concrete outcomes. Others insisted that Meghan's proposals were bold, far-reaching, and independent, challenging traditional norms and potentially altering the royal hierarchy. Harry was forced to weigh these conflicting accounts, assessing credibility, intent, and underlying motives. This was not just an exercise in investigation. It was a strategic battle for understanding, context, and control. A pivotal moment in Harry's private inquiry came when he identified a key advisor who had direct knowledge of the meeting. Their initial reluctance to speak only heightened tension. But through careful dialogue, cross-checking, and persistence, Harry began piecing together critical elements. Meghan had approached King Charles with proposals for image rehabilitation, re-entry into public life, and autonomy in certain decisions. She had framed her requests thoughtfully, strategically, and independently. For Harry, this confirmation was simultaneously validating and devastating. The emotional dimension of the investigation could not be ignored. Harry grappled with feelings of exclusion, doubt, and betrayal, while also acknowledging Meghan's skill and audacity. Every revelation forced him to reconcile personal pain with the practical necessity of understanding strategy. How could he confront her? How could he address the king? And most importantly, how could he navigate a situation where trust had been fractured, alliances were unclear, and the stakes were monumental? Further complicating matters, Harry discovered evidence suggesting that Meghan had not acted impulsively. Her meeting was premeditated, aligned with broader goals, and executed with precision. The level of foresight and planning was remarkable, indicating that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a calculated move with long-term implications. Every day, every detail, every step was intentional, reinforcing the depth of her strategy and the gravity of her choices. Audience question: would you confront the person immediately, or wait to gather every piece of evidence first? Harry's challenge highlights the tension between emotional reaction and strategic patience. Acting too soon could provoke conflict, while waiting could allow the narrative to evolve further, potentially complicating outcomes. In the course of his investigation, Harry also uncovered subtle signals suggesting that Meghan's meeting was part of a larger pattern of independent actions. Communications with certain palace advisors, strategic public appearances, and even private conversations indicated that she was operating on a trajectory designed to reclaim influence, image, and autonomy. For Harry, the implications were staggering. He was not simply reacting to a single event. He was confronting a calculated series of maneuvers that had been unfolding beyond his awareness. The investigation ultimately left Harry with a dual understanding. Emotionally, he had been blindsided, betrayed, and challenged. Strategically, he faced a complex scenario demanding patience, insight, and precise action. Every move he made next would have to account for personal feelings, palace protocol, and public perception. Every decision would ripple across relationships, influence, and the royal narrative. And just when Harry thought he had a full grasp of Meghan's strategy, a new revelation arrived. One of the aides subtly hinted at further communications between Meghan and external advisors, plans, proposals, and contingencies that Harry had yet to uncover. The intrigue deepened, and the stakes escalated. Every piece of the puzzle seemed to lead to another, more intricate layer of strategy. How do you process betrayal when it cuts not just into your public life, but straight into the heart of your personal world? That's what Harry faced in the days following his discovery of Meghan's secret meeting with King Charles. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a swirling storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion, and an undercurrent of disbelief that someone so close could orchestrate such a calculated maneuver without him. The emotional fallout was immediate. Harry felt blindsided, not just by Meghan, but by the palace ecosystem that had allowed the meeting to occur without his knowledge. Every conversation he had since then carried the weight of suspicion. Even trusted aides seemed layered with hidden agendas. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming. He was part of a family built on centuries of tradition and protocol, yet in this moment, he felt like an outsider in his own life. Anger was the first to emerge. How could Meghan act independently, negotiate directly with the king, and exclude him entirely? The thought of her positioning herself strategically while leaving him uninformed was infuriating. Every scenario he imagined intensified the sense of betrayal. The palace walls that had once felt secure now seemed confining, suffocating, and full of whispers that only amplified his frustration. Confusion followed closely. How had he not seen the signs? Had there been subtle hints, minor clues he overlooked, or was the operation so meticulously executed that detection was impossible? Harry found himself replaying past conversations, public appearances, and private interactions, searching for any indication that Meghan had been planning this all along. The more he looked, the more complex the picture became. It wasn't simply a matter of secrecy. It was an intricate web of strategy, perception, and influence. At the same time, grief crept in. It wasn't just about trust or betrayal. It was about a relationship he had invested in deeply, personally, and publicly. The realization that Meghan had acted independently, making moves that affected their shared future, was emotionally devastating. Every thought of partnership, collaboration, and mutual decision-making was now overshadowed by doubt. Could he ever fully trust her again? Could their bond withstand the weight of such calculated autonomy? The emotional toll wasn't confined to introspection. It spilled into interactions with family, aides, and advisors. Harry found himself more guarded, his questions sharper, his patience thinner. The palace, with its centuries of formal decorum, felt suddenly oppressive. Every meeting, every briefing, every casual remark became a test. Was this another layer of secrecy, manipulation, or strategy? Could he trust what he was being told, or was it a curated narrative designed to influence his reactions? Audience question: how do you balance the desire for understanding with the sting of betrayal? How do you confront someone you love when you don't fully know their motives? Harry's dilemma mirrors this tension perfectly. Every move required careful consideration.